In order to talk about neurological disorders, such as Alzheimer's, we have to talk about normal memory. And that's our goal today. So this is a pie chart that I pulled from USA Today, and you see that in it asks 40-year-olds, how is your memory compared to 10 years ago? And about half say somewhat worse, a percentage, maybe 10%, say a lot worse. And I think that this is an increasing difficulty for people, 40 and up, that they have a difficult time looking at their memory and considering how their memory is doing. Is it better? Is it worse? And why? So we're going to start by thinking about what normal memory is and some of the kinds of problems that all of us experience. So you remember from general psychology that what happens is there are stimuli that come in through sensory memory, and there's some sort of interference. So maybe until I said something, you didn't even notice my cat meowing at you. But if you attend to that, it gets moved into your working memory, or sometimes called short-term memory. And if you rehearse it, it's going to stay there. So for example, if I were to give you my office number, 393-2254, you could maintain that information for a longer period of time, unless there was some sort of interference, for example, paying attention to, to this videotape. If you've rehearsed it well enough, it gets encoded and transferred into long-term memory, which tends to decay with time, and also is sometimes difficult to retrieve. And any of these things, the interference or in sensory memory or in short-term memory, or the decay with long-term memory, leads to what we refer to as forgetting. Now, in long-term memory, there are three different kinds of things that we remember, that are stored in memory. There are memories of, for example, your last Thanksgiving dinner, and that's an episodic memory. You might remember the definition of borderline personality disorder, and that's in semantic memory. And also your memory for how to tie your shoes, or some kinds of procedure, is in procedural memory. And information from your short-term memory is transferred, or working memory is transferred into this long-term store or long-term memory, and also retrieved from it. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that we may not store that information accurately. We may not store it in a way that we can retrieve it. We may have difficulty with retrieval. And all of these things are things for us to be thinking about as we consider short-term, long-term, or deficits. For example, I would encourage you to watch this very short video of Stan, who used to be a TV producer. And if you look at him, he appears relaxed and aware, and yet has a difficult time identifying what his career was in the past. You're going to see a number of different kinds of mistakes in this, and I want you to be thinking about these in terms of short-term, long-term, etc. And these disruptions occur in different ways. So normal forgetting and problematic forgetting take two different kinds of forms. So it is normal for us to forget unimportant facts or part of your experience. Today, when I'm recording this, it's Saturday, and I'm having a hard time remembering what I had for dinner on Tuesday night. Not very important. Now, if I keep thinking about it, and maybe even, talk with my husband about it, I may recall that information at a later point, and may actually be able to generate some other kinds of information relative to that dinner. In general, the forgotten information is more distant rather than things that happened pretty recently. So I'm much more likely to forget, something that happened, a couple of years ago, or even last week, as opposed to something that happened today. So I remember what I had yesterday, but I don't remember what I had to eat on Tuesday. Generally, though, normal forgetting means that we're aware of the shortcomings that we experience and apologize for these. I can't remember your name. Or find some other way of compensating for them. So I might, might listen to you and, listening for any cues that might help remind me of what your name is. On the other hand, problematic forgetting is shorter. Short retention span, and it's gone. Generally, there is greater inability to recall events of the recent past, both unimportant ones and more important ones. So, for example, some of your grandparents may not remember things, from relatively recently, but more distant things. They may remember and call you, for example, by your mother's name, something that's in their current memory. Sometimes there's some distorted recall of events. So, for example, in the Stan video, you see some confabulations. So he is trying to explain what happened by making things up that seem to kind of fit. Also, there can be disorientation to time and place, and eventually to person. So I was out walking with someone with significant dementia. It was in August. The sweat was pouring down. It was a very hot day. And this person asked me why I was there and wondered whether it was Christmas. Now notice that these are very different kinds of processes. And what I want you to be doing in the videos for this unit is paying attention to these processes and notice what kinds of mistakes and ways of talking are within normal limits and what are not. You may also want to be, paying attention to your memory. What things do you remember? And what things don't you remember? And what kinds of things do you have difficulty remembering? And then put those in to your thinking about short-term, long-term memory and what might explain that. Also pay attention to that in these later videos. So for example, the neuropsych video that we're going to look at includes ways of telling whether the woman actually has heard some of the things that the assessor is asking. And take care.